call me Sandra. Yeah, no need to call professor or anything else, just call me Sandra. Okay, within this course, if you have any questions, just communicate with me via the email given in the PowerPoint. And you can ask for meeting with me either before the class or after the class. But first of all, make appointment, okay? So if a group of you want to have a revision or a discussion of any specific topic, you can always make appointment with me, okay? Through this email. It all depends on your choice. There may be chances that a group of you need to contact with me. So, back to my background. Yeah, basically, I work as a chemist in government laboratory. Yeah, with expertise in food testing. And then, in 1998, many years ago, maybe before you born, I was seconded to the Hong Kong Accreditation Service. That is the only accreditation body in Hong Kong, government body, okay, as accreditation officer. So at there, I work as an accreditation officer for consumer products. What is meaning of consumer products? That means boys and children's product, furniture, anything with consumer, okay? And the second discipline I work in is food testing, chemical testing. What is chemical testing? That includes miscellaneous, including gold assay, jewelry, anything else, okay? Textile and garment. And also for environmental testing, within HAWKERS or within Hong Kong AS, I'm not working in that field. But after that, in government laboratory, I work in the air section. That is environmental, okay? So, that is my background. And within the development of the new ISO IEC 7025, I was also working in the Hong Kong AS. So there are quite a number of seminars held between different countries. We formulate policy in measurement certainty. We also formulate a requirement on buffer validation and the new requirement of the ISO IEC 7025. So you have been get in touch of a number of courses in the first semester. So you should have some understanding or overview of the 7025. So what is the requirement of buffer validation? Oh, back to the lecturer. Honestly speaking, this course, buffer validation, is far more difficult than the laboratory management. Laboratory management basically is the understanding of the requirement. But for this course, I will introduce to you many specific terms that you haven't encountered in your undergrad course, okay? And also, quite a number of examples are my personal experience. So I have been working in accreditation industry. Let me see, how many years? From 1998 to now. What about testing discipline? Testing discipline, even longer. I joined government laboratory in 1978. So I'm very old. I should say, I have been retired for a long time ago. So it is time for me to retire for many times already. Anyway, as far as possible, I appreciate feedback from all of you during classes. I can stop if you have questions. For those topics I haven't covered, it's not a problem. They will not be present in the examination, okay? So regarding examination, I think all of you is very keen. What is the mode of examination? What about your other course? Midterm and then final exam, close book. For my course, from the first year, I've been teaching for this course for over, from the start, 2013. That means over 10 years. All the examination are open book. But don't laugh. Open book is the most difficult examination because I let you open book. So you can think of the questions that I ask. This is a master course. Don't think that I will set any question, multiple choice, fill in the blank. That is not my style. I prefer analytical mind. The major objective of this course is to train your analytical mind. Okay? How to analyze the problem and how to make comparison. So, back to the course material, or this is the most important part. The examination will contribute 50%. And for the short quiz, you can make a choice. Either midterm, short quiz, short quiz, or working on a project. What is your choice? Because somebody prefer doing homework instead of getting into examination or test. Okay? So I let you make the choice.
So project means assignment. So project means assignment.
For the first, this is a laboratory report. Project means I give you a project title, a title. So you will search within the web and work with your partner. This is a group project. So you can work together and submit to me a final report on the topic. You select, okay? And then make a PowerPoint for presentation. Once again, it sounds that all of you are so frightened of presentation. You can present either in Mandarin, Chinese, or English. Within this three languages. For other language, I don't think I can understand, okay? As this is a group project, for the report itself, all of you will have the same mark, because this is a group effort. But for the presentation, it may be different, okay? So it all depends on you. I let you to make the choice. In the old day, I will set laboratory report and presentation and the project. But it is funny, they don't want group project, but individual project. So no presentation for individual. Too many of you, how to present within a class of 3 hours. So think about it. You can have the choice after break, okay? The objective of setting a group project is to let you to familiar with your classmate, and you can learn more different topics. The approach in getting into different analysis. Because for group project, I will set topics on food testing, environmental testing, consumer products testing, construction testing. Some may be in-house method, some may be standard method, okay? So you can encounter different approach in that sense. Of course, it all depends on your objective in attending this course. How many of you are current testing practitioner? That means working in the laboratory now. Only one? No one work it off. Just a few of you. So, for those who work in testing industry, and if you want to develop your career in testing, then this is a must for chemical analysis, and also for quite a number of different testing disciplines. This is a must. So, but you may find it very difficult because you don't have any experience in touch with equipment, in touch with the different terms. So I will go slowly. It all depends on your pace, okay? So another questions for the laboratory class. Once again, this is also optional. So funny. Everything is optional. But you have no choice. You need to take this. This is a core subject. You can't drop this course, okay? Why is that the attendance in laboratory class is optional? Because in the previous years, for those who are working in testing disciplines already, the laboratory class somehow maybe a waste of time for them because they are so familiar with the laboratory operation. But for those who doesn't have any experience in laboratory testing, then this is a good chance you get with some hands-on experience. Why is that we have so many different terms? You can have a real look on the data you created within different groups, okay? So this is a chance for you to face the reality, I should say that. So what about for those who doesn't attend the laboratory class? How can they submit the laboratory report? I will use the data from all the other group, or, I just want to get a degree, I don't want to attend class. Fine, I don't mind. It's your own choice, okay? Then I will give you data. You need to be a laboratory, okay? So, you can have two choices. What is the 25 marks? Short quiz, midterm, or project, okay? And you have a choice, have laboratory class or no laboratory class, but laboratory report is a must. So, well, understand my requirement, okay? So, let's start. This is just the course outcome. After this course, hopefully, you can acquire fundamental knowledge on how to validate and verify the chemical test. What is the purpose of validation and verification? To get valid result. Valid means right result, correct result, okay? So, before you can get valid result, you also learn different characteristics of a method. That is your calibration curve, the detection and quantification limit, tolerance, recovery, and precision. Now, maybe, what all is that? We'll go one by one, okay? And define the quality control parameter. The sequence is method validation, and then measurement uncertainty. Measurement uncertainty is a part of method validation. And after going through these two, then you can set up your quality control requirement. So all the three combined together will make your result valid, okay? So within the quality control, we will use control chart. And also within the part of quality control, we will touch on some of the, we call qualification of equipment. Qualification of equipment. For quality control and qualification of equipment, they are factual material, easier to understand. Easier to understand. I will still give you the material, but may not have sufficient times to cover all of them, okay? Because maybe we need to spend quite a lot of time on the first part, method validation. That are new to you, okay? So, we learn about how to kick off a method validation. What is CRM? What is traceability? I think you heard of these terms already within the ISO IEC 7025. And for the method performance characteristic, we will go through one by one: calibration, selectivities, limits, recovery, and other method performance characteristics. That is the general, this is the general part. But for this different discipline, we have specific requirement. What is the meaning of specific requirement? For food testing, we have this specific requirement. For food, also specific. Pharmaceutical test, also specific, okay? Confirmation criteria, how to confirm the identity of your analyte. That will be part of the method validation protocol. Proficiency testing program, quality control plan, control chart, review of the control chart, and the equipment qualification, okay? That is the general course outline. So, you must heard of what is Hong Kong Accreditation Service. That is the only legal and government body in Hong Kong responsible for accreditation. And for testing, the scheme is Hong Kong Laboratory Accreditation Scheme. That means under Hong Kong AS, we have a scheme for accreditation of competence laboratory. That is HOCRIS. We also have two other schemes. One is the IAS. IAS is inspection body. We accredit inspection body. And then we have another scheme, the CAS. That is certification body, okay? So, in general, we have three schemes within the HKAS. One is laboratory. The second one is inspection. The third one is certification. Unluckily, in Hong Kong, we don't have any scheme for personnel. We can have scheme for personnel. That is personal qualification, okay? The standard for personal qualification is ISO IEC 7024. So you can see that almost in sequence. Inspection is 7020. Certification is 21. Person is 24, and laboratory is 25. When you say that you are a accredited laboratory, what is the meaning? Does it mean that all our activities performed are valid, the results are true, are good enough? No, we just accredit specific tasks. Specific task, that is specific test or specific inspection activities, okay? So that is the objective of accreditation. When we say accreditation and certification, normally it is easy to mix up the two. In Chinese, what is accreditation? What is certification in Chinese? 认可是 accreditation. What about certification? 认证。在台湾 change that. They use the same term in Taiwan. So the Chinese translation in mainland and Taiwan is a little bit different, okay? In Hong Kong, we follow mainland. So 认可是 accreditation. the two difference, when you look at the definition, you will see that issue of a statement, both of them is issue of the statement, that is your certificate. Related to product, process, system, or person, okay? But in accreditation, what is the meaning? Demonstrating of its competence to carry out specific tasks. For accreditation, we say that this is an evidence in proving your competence. So, if you are a certification body, you can carry out audit, ISO 9000 for different organization. The auditor will go to the organization, check their quality system and their record, okay? And for the accreditation body, when we carry out the accreditation, we are checking the competence of the auditor in carry out the audit in specific field, okay? So for the certification, they certify your company as ISO 9000. But for Hong Kong CAS, the assessor and the officer will go to the certification body. They will accompany with the auditor to a particular organization and look at their performance, how to conduct an audit. So this is a competence evaluation to see whether they can perform specific tasks on specific area, okay? So that is the difference, okay? Don't mix up the two. So when one told you that when you want to identify a laboratory, just like nowadays, there are so many, just like the case, the safety net. You want to find a laboratory. When I say that, oh, I'm certified for ISO 9000, do they competence to carry out the test? Some laboratory also certified for ISO 9000. But this is not equivalent. This is not equivalent. Only accreditation is a proof of competence, okay? So don't mix up. In the old day, in Hong Kong, we also, the laboratory before, or the organization before, they claim that they are the impartial organization. In Chinese, it's 公正行, okay? But it doesn't mean that they are competent. When you look at the TV, there are so many people coming out and say that, oh, this is a source of leakage of water. But they are not proven of their competence. Only for laboratory accredited in that particular test, then they are proved to be competent to carry out the test, okay? The result is far more valid than the non-accredited parties. So, regarding the whole accreditation industry, who set the terms? Oh, we have many different terms. Trueness, accuracy, uncertainty. Who define these terms? Basically, we have 7 organizations within the worldwide. So for BIPM, they set the standard for weigh and measure, more related to physical part. ICE for electrical, yeah. IFCC is clinical chemistry. ISO is the organization for standardization of method for standard. IUPAC, 2 IUPAC, one is for applied chemistry, another one is for applied physics. OIML is the International Organization of Laboratories, okay? So this organization do have many publications. they set out the SI unit. So when we talk about the terms within the laboratory, if the terms used are different, the result may be a little bit different. The definition is different. The approach in defining will be different. So we should follow international guideline. Or within HOCRIS, we accept, if you can clearly point out the reference you use, of course that should be international or regional standard, then we accept you set the terms as that particular definition, okay? So these 7 organizations work together and they publish a paper called VIM. That is vocabulary of international metrologies. So I think I have given to you this standard, the VIM. It is quite funny. For the ISO standard, they have copyright. You need to buy it. But within some organization, the OIML, they have the similar publication. The content is exactly the same as the ISO standard, but they just use their own code, and they claim that you can download, free for download, for personal use. So I have downloaded the VIM from the OIML, and I think I have sent, I haven't sent the reference to you. So after this class, I will compile a list of reference and send to you, not to the black box, because although they are free for download, but I send to so many recipients, it's not so good. So through my personal email, okay? So it is better to communicate with my personal email. So for other important organizations, within the Europe, you have EURCHEM. EURCHEM is Cooperation for Analytical Chemistry in Europe. There are many documents or guidelines within this EURCHEM that are free for download as your reference. Within this course, quite a number of references come from here. Quite a number of, I should say, a number of material come from EURCHEM. For uncertainty, we also base on the EURCHEM approach. Eurolab is organization for testing in Europe. They set off quite a number of examples and approach and policy on environmental testing. Okay. This is EA, is the European Cooperation for Accreditation, quite similar to the Hong Kong AS. Okay. And this is Euromet, is measurement standard that is related to physical measurement. And IRMM is the Institute for Reference Material and Measurement. You can buy a number of reference material from this organization. Then in the US, what is the metrology organization in US? That is NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies. International, we have CITEC, ILAC, and APAC. APAC is APAC Pacific Accreditation Cooperation. ILAC is international, including the APAC and EA, okay? So just Asian Pacific, including USA. And then another party is Europe. 2 main parties joined together will form the ILAC. Okay. So this is the accreditation hierarchy, you can say that. So, the international vocabulary of metrologies, you can download from here, and then the document number is JCGM 200-2012, okay? I think all of you attend the measurement uncertainty also in this second semester. So you can also download the whole ISO-GAN guide from this website. Their document number is JCGM 100, okay? So these two are free for download for personal use. For this ISO standard, very sorry, you can't download. But for a number of times, we also apply this free standard. There are 6 of them, the ISO 3534, part 1 to part 6. And these 3 are quite useful. The first one is just terms, the second one is applied statistics, the third one is the design of experiments. Okay, so this is just an introduction on how to find out your documents or your guideline. I think most of you are very puzzled. Where can I find the materials? Yeah, we can go to the web, but what to key in? How to find out all sorts of material? So that are the basic organization that you can find a lot of material. So when we touch on some topic, I will go to that website and then give you to have a look so that you can find out your required documents. So how many types of methods are there? Can you tell me some? How to classify a method? Standard, yes, standard method. One is standard. What is the counterpart? That is non-standard. For non-standard, that will be in-house. We call it in-house method. But this is one of the classification. But what about if I classify in another way? Quantification method. Then, yes, qualification, okay? That is qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis. And for that classification, we have 4 types of method. So let's see how to classify the method based on their different definition. The first one is rational test method. For this type of classification, there is only 2. They classify into 2. One is rational, another one is empirical. Rational and empirical. If you want, within HOCRES, we have a system, application as an approved signatory. That means you have to be interviewed by the HOCRES officer and the technical assessor before you can sign endorsed report. We say that. So for this approved signatory, in the old day, when I conduct interview for this approved signatory, this is a mandatory questions for me. I always ask the candidate how to differentiate rational and empirical method. Rational, when you look at the definition, they measure a property. So the properties can be anything. Water content, or water organic content, any properties. Temperature is also a properties, okay? That is defined independent of any test method. That means no matter what method you use, you should arrive at comparable result. I never say same result. In chemical analysis, it is so difficult to have same result, but only comparable result within the measurement uncertainty, okay? So, these types of method they have an objective true value. Otherwise, when we use different method, how can we arrive at a so-called similar or comparable result? Because there is a true value, okay? So in another terms, you can say that that is a determination of the total content. Total content. So I give you an example. We aim at a true value. That means total analysis. Example, total metals in toys component. For a toys, if you go to the consumer products laboratory, the toys laboratory, you will find out that a toys only may be cost for under $10. But the number of tests they conduct on that particular toys is numerous. We subdivide it into plastic, paper, paint coating, small parts, metals, and 6 classification, okay? And each part should be carried out for analysis of heavy metals. Now, when the toys is shipped to Europe, a total of, I think 19 elements should be determined. So you see the huge amount of analysis for that. But for that one, nowadays, for that analysis, that is not a rational method. Not a rational method. Because they are not testing for total. When we say that we test for the total, you need to try your best to extract all the metals from your samples. So you can think of many different approach in digesting the metals into these acid solution. That is based on your knowledge of metals, okay? So you can either use acid to digest your sample so that the metal will dissolve, will go into the acid. But during this part of digestion, you can use microwave digestion. Somehow you can use hot plate. That means you heat up the acid to 200 degrees Celsius. That is also acceptable, okay? That is also another form of method. So maybe, oh, I don't like that. I like to use dry etching. What is the meaning of dry etching? Think of a matrix. The 2 major components will be organic and inorganic. Everything is organic and inorganic. So at high temperature up to 500 degrees Celsius, all the organic should be burned out to give you carbon dioxide, okay? At high temperature, of course, there is a supply of air and carbon dioxide, a supply of air into your system. The only thing left behind will be ash. That is inorganic. So you will dissolve the inorganic part in acid, then go for further analysis. So from this microwave, hot plate, dry ash, the metal content should be comparable. So this is rational, okay? So you can use different method. Your laboratory can use method A, their laboratory can use method B, and then you can use method C, okay? Then full method validation and approved by third party provision testing, then you can say that, oh, all the laboratory concerned can produce comparable results and our results are valid. So that is the approach. So the first one is rational method. That is total analysis. Then what about empirical? Empirical just like a formula. dependent on the test method used to measure it, you should follow strictly according to procedure as documented in the test standard and the condition. All the equipment, all the reagent apparatus should be the same in order to get similar result, okay, or comparable result. Here, we say that the method bias is 0 and the matrix variation is irrelevant because for a standard method, they have studied different matrix that can be applied by this method, okay? So you cannot use the standard method for other matrix as specified in this test standard. So if the standard say that determination of lead in plastic, can I use the same method in determination of lead in wood? No, because the matrix is not the same. So that is empirical. And when we say that method bias is 0, because the method is a standard method, itself do not have any bias. What is bias? What is bias? That is the difference from the true value, is the bias, okay? As there is no true value, so the method itself doesn't have any bias. It set out the rules in conducting the analysis. So the result, we call the reference result, will be the mean result of all the laboratory participate in a proficiency testing program, okay? That means, there are over 50 or 100 laboratories working on the same test sample, using the same method. Of course, the reagent and equipment will be different. And the result produced is based on this method, okay? Then the mean result will be the true reference value. The method itself doesn't have any bias, but your laboratory do have bias because laboratory A and laboratory B are different results. When they sum up and getting the mean, you will have difference from the mean result, okay? So that is only the laboratory bias, but not the method bias. For this type of method, they are not testing for total amount. So there is no objective true value, but they are testing a parameter that based on the method. Here I give you an example. Also metals, soluble metals in toys component. The previous example is total metals, but now it is soluble metals. Although you may add some metals into your toys. For example, we intentionally add some metals into the plastic and then make a toys. So then we know the exact amount of metals in the toys. If we test for total, then you can evaluate how far you can recover the metals from the toys, okay? But in this sense, if we add a certain amount, for example, 10 nanogram, 10 nanogram or milligram, it all depends on, into the plastic in making a toys. So the true value is 10 milligram. But at 37 degrees Celsius, in a medium that is 0.07 normal hydrochloric acid, do you know how many metals can be leached out? That will not be true value, except you carry out the analysis by different laboratory. So the mean result will be the true value, okay? So the method itself doesn't have any bias, but only the result produced by different laboratory are different. So this type of methods are called empirical method. Empirical method. So I also give you another example. Total suspended solid or total solid dry at 103 to 105 degrees Celsius. This is a environmental test. We test for the solid amount of solid present in water or wastewater. So for total solid, it is easy. I just get maybe 100 ml or 200 ml or 500 ml of water, and then steam to dryness on the water bath. Okay. Then we need to dry to constant rate to at a temperature 103 to 105. We dry at 103 to 105. The residue remain will be the total solid. But what about if I dry at 120? Will the result be different? Think about it. Will the result be different? If the temperature is not the same, will the result be different? Only drying. This test is very simple. Drying in the oven at 103 to 105. The question is, will the result be different? Oh, some say that yes, must be different. But why is that different? The temperature will affect quite a number of parameters. For example, water component. At a higher temperature, some water component that may be evaporated only at 102 will remain at a temperature at 103. So the total solid, the result will be different. So get the meaning? So the amount of total solid is defined by the method protocol, only at 103 and 105. If you change the temperature, the result will be different. The result will be different. This also applies to moisture content. Moisture content in food. So in getting moisture content is 103 to 105. Also, more or less this range. But how can you ensure that that is still the moisture? In food, there are so many essential oil that are volatile. Get the meaning? But only according to standard procedure for this particular type of matrix at this temperature, then the loss in weight is due to moisture. Okay? But that may not be true for other matrix. Okay? So this is empirical method. Empirical method. Defined by the method. Defined by the method itself. There are quite a number of examples in environmental testing. But if you are not familiar with environmental testing, then, when I talk about this method, you may not find, you may not understand. For example, COD and BOD, they are also defined by the method only. The definition is defined by the method, and the result is also dependent on how you conduct the method. Okay? So two different types of method. So here, standard method. In Hong Kong, which types of method are classified as standard? International method, reputable association. Only these two types are classified as method. Either international or regional method, we also accept as standard method. That means Wobel is also standard method. ISO, BS, that is British. ANZ, that is New Zealand. Okay, AS is Australia. All these are standard method, they are regional method. What about if a method is published in a journal? Do we regard it as a standard method? No. The difference between published method and that published in international organization. For most of the method published in international organization, they undergo collaborative study. Collaborative study. That means a number of laboratories worldwide is invited to join a study in fixing the parameter of a particular standard method to see whether they can give comparable result. Okay? So standard method and published method is different. You can always publish a method, but that is your own result. Others may not be able to reproduce it. Okay? So in Hong Kong, in HOCRIS I should say, we accredit 3 types of method. The first one is standard method. The second one is standard method with modification. The third one is in-house method. That is non-standard. But for standard method with modification, we tend not to grant the accreditation to this laboratory because standard method is standard. You have modified it already. Can you say that it is still standard? Maybe the result you have gone through method validation can have similar result, but your ultimate customer, that means your client, will ask, what is the difference between modification? Why is that you need to modify? Okay? A typical example, this has been questioned by the public, I should say, is the method for gold arsenic 9999. In Hong Kong, our goal is 0.9999. That means 99.99%, 49. But one of the laboratory have a standard method with modification. So can their result be trusted? Why is that they don't use standard method? So we try to prevent this confusion. So nowadays, we seldom have standard method with modification, okay? So in-house method, anything other than standard method will be in-house. So we have rational, empirical, standard method, non-standard method, and standard method with modification. Now we come to another type of classification. What is this classification? This classification is based on a publication from EU, that is Europe. This document is very good, I will give to you. So, they classify method into 4 types. One is qualitative, the other one is quantitative, the third one is confirmative, the last one is screening. You may find out it is quite difficult to differentiate screening and quantification method. For quantification, we just identify the presence of a substance based on its chemical, biological, or physical properties, okay? The second one, quantification, you will get the exact amount of your analyte in the sample. And then confirmation, that means apart from quantification, you need to have further analysis on your sample to make sure the analyte identified is truly what you want to find out, okay? And the last screening, detect the person, but at the level of interest. That means we want to screen the presence of a particular analyte at a particular level. That will be screening method, okay? So, this is some of the example. I'll give you an example. Determination of chloramphenicol residue in food. Chloramphenicol have been banned for many years, but on and off, we still can find chloramphenicol. In Hong Kong, herring crab, and some of the fish, we still can. The frequency dropped a lot already in recent years because this has been banned for many years. But when you say that, have you think of a questions? In our regulation, if you attend the food course, you will know that there are quite a number of food regulations. One of the regulations on antibiotics is caption 139, okay? And then we say that this is zero tolerance. What is zero in analytical chemistry? Can you say that, oh, it is zero level? For those who have been working in commercial laboratory will know that you can never have an absolute zero. The level you can detect it always depend on the sensitivity of your instrument. So we can't have a zero, absolute zero. We just say that this is not presence with a detection limit smaller than a particular level, okay? We just can't detect the presence of this analyte at the detection limit we claim, okay? So here in Hong Kong, when we say absence of chloramphenicol, means that the level of chloramphenicol is lower than 0.3 ppb. So ppb, another question. Who can answer me? What is ppb? Maybe ppm first. What is ppm? Parts per million. ppm. Yes, but if I change it to microgram, milligram, or any sort, then what is ppm?
Milligram per
ppm.
Milligram per kilogram.
Milligram per kilogram. Okay. Milligram per kilogram. That is ppm. Okay. So, quite a number, even for those working in laboratory, they always mix up all this. How to change ppm and sample solution and all sorts of this unit. So ppb, microgram per kilogram, okay? So we express in kilogram, not in gram. In analytical chemistry, we always express, yes, we base on kilogram, not gram, okay? So ppb is a very low level, 0.3. So if I want to, if you receive a client, or if you want to get the tender from government laboratory, every year they will tender out, they will issue the tender for determination of chloramphenicol in food. So, but you should fulfill the requirement. First of all, you should select a method that is capable to detect at least 0.3 ppb. Okay, so that is the first question. There is no standard method for choromphenicol, especially in multi-food, in hairy crab. Hairy crab is quite unique in Hong Kong and mainland, you can say that. So there is no ISO standard for that. So example, choromphenicol, the first many method in the market, qualitative, I just want to detect the presence. We use strip test. It based on its biochemical properties, antigen and antibody reaction. This is an antigen and antibody reaction. So qualitative, just detect, okay? But you can say that there is also a limit of detection. More or less, it is quite similar to screening test. But for this type of test, we regard it as qualitative, okay? The second one, screening test, because the legislation limit, the hidden legislation limit is 0.3 ppb, then we can use another technique, that is ELISA. Maybe you haven't learned of what is ELISA. That is enzyme-linked immunosorbence assay. I'm not sure whether you will learn this in food testing. I should be the co-tutor of the food testing, but as my partner say that he can take up all for me, so I am here now. I don't need to carry out the course for you. In the old day, I will talk about screening method, then ELISA will be covered in my course, okay? But now it has been divided into certification and analysis. So the part on analysis will be greatly reduced. Food is a complicated, basically everything is complicated analysis, okay? So for this ELISA, we also based on antigen and antibody reaction. But just that your antigen or antibody is linked up to an enzyme. That enzyme will react with your substrate, giving you color. By measuring the intensity of your color, then it will give you back the concentration of the analyte. So this is a semi-quantitative test, you can say that, and this is also a screening test. You put standard solution at 0.3 ppb. When the color is higher than 0.3, that means it is a failed sample. Okay, so screening test. The last one, quantitative and confirmative. So for these two methods, qualitative and screening, can you say that they must be choromphenicol? Although we say that antibody-antigen reaction is quite specific, but within the group of choromphenicol drug, there is other drug that can also react with these kits. So just by this general qualitative or screening test, you can't say that this low amount of this low amount of signal is totally due to choromphenicol. We do need another confirmation test to confirm its identity, okay? So nowadays, the confirmation technique for choromphenicol is two techniques. One is GC mass spec, normally negative ion. Another is LC MS. Only by MS we can say that, oh, the signal is due to chloramphenicol. Okay, so I will cover confirmation criteria because for trace analysis, we need to confirm its identity. So 4 types of tests. So this is another classification. You may ask, what is the use of knowing all this? Yes, honestly, just making the different terms is not so important. But just to make you a clear picture of what type of test, and before you develop or you make your choice, you should know how to select a test to fit your purpose, to fit the intention of your customer. Okay? So for pharmaceutical, they also have 4 classes. The first one, Cat 1. That is the analytical procedure for quantification of major component, okay? That means quantification with high concentration. Cat 2, analytical procedure for determination of impurities. So that is quantification with low level. We say that this is impurity, of course the level is low, okay? Somehow, this Cat 2 is subdivided into 2. Some is limit test, some is quantification test. Because for some of the pharmaceutical products, they just set out that the level should not be larger than a specific level. So this is a limit test, but you also need to quantify the result in comparison with the limit, okay? Cat 3 is performance characteristic. This is not, in Hong Kong, we have a field laboratory accredited for Cat 1, seldom Cat 2, Cat 3, and Cat 4, okay. Cat 3, that is the characteristic of a tablet or a pills. That is your medicine, okay? How long it will dissolve the solution? How fast is the drug released out into your stomach or into your whole digestion system? So this is not really related to chemical test, but we make use of the chemical analysis to determine the content and then to determine the drug release rate and also the solution weight, okay? For the solution, you don't need that. We just put all the drugs into a container and look at the time. It totally dissolves out into the medium. That is the solution. So, 4 types of tests. For identification tests, somehow similar to confirmation tests, but not trace analysis. Because you want to identify whether the major component is that identity. So all these tests for pharmaceutical tests, we seldom have in-house method. All the tests are basically based on pharmacopoeia, either USP, that is US pharmacopoeia, or CP, that is Chinese, or BP, okay? We follow the method stated in this pharmacopoeia, okay? So for their identification test, they will not use GCA-MS or LC-MS-MS. The normal technique is IR, FTIR, because they can get the pure substance. So when they go for the IR analysis, then they get a match. Nowadays we have FTIR. they get a match with the standard, then they say that, oh, the identity is confirmed by TLC and also IR. Okay. For me, TLC is not confirmative. It is just a separation technique, but not confirmative. So, based on for different disciplines, there will be different classification. Just an idea for you, how to classify the test. So here we come to, this is very familiar for you. In ISO IEC 7025, method, selection of method validation and method verification covered in 7.2. So 7.2.1 is selection and verification. Use appropriate method, and you should have procedure, including all activities. That means activities starting from subsampling, how to make a test portion from your laboratory sample. You need to have a procedure. And then the test method and also the uncertainty part, okay? The measurement uncertainty. Use the latest version unless there is a need to keep the old version. Nowadays, Hawkers allow the laboratory to keep two versions because some of the tender will use the old version, so only two versions. And then verify, you can perform your method before introduce in your laboratory. So we will cover what is verification. And I can say that in Hong Kong, there is no difference between verification and validation. There should be difference, but in Hong Kong, there is no difference. It sounds funny, because you need to build up your measurement uncertainty. Without repeated measurement, how can you produce your measurement uncertainty? So, the final conclusion is the assessor will ask you to follow the protocol of method validation and work out all the recovery and work out all the precision study. So, the two just the same. But internationally, there is a guideline how to verify standard method for food testing. But few assessors are aware of this requirement, so they just follow the protocol for method validation, okay? So, record should be maintained, and starting from this last subcourse of 7.2.1, this is basically a method development. So all the method development should be planned and then assigned to competent personnel, equipped with adequate resources. This adopt the approach of ISO 9000, design control. Design, that means design. Before you make a product, you need to build up a design. That is the design input, okay? That is the design input. You select appropriate, you select a designer, and then make up a plan and work out the product. The product is our result, okay? And we refine the design and then loop again, and then the final acceptable product. So this is a design control process. Should be design input, design verification, and then design output. But mostly in Hong Kong, we just have one input and then one output. Because when you look at this cycle, everything should be backup and should be informed of all personnel involved. For most of the laboratory, they undergo the same process, but just that they don't maintain the record. So we don't insist to make the laboratory in troublesome. So you just have the design input and then the design output and verification. That will be fine, okay? But the original concept is a looping for several times. Before you develop a method, there are many changes, but we never documented it, including your maybe the temperature, your oven temperature, your column gradient, or solvent composition. But just that we don't record. Okay, this is a common practice in Hong Kong. I just can't say that. So for 7.2.2, that is validation. So the first part is verification, applied for standard method. The second part is for validation. How extensive a validation is needed will depend on your intended use. Okay. Also record. And you need to have a conclusion. Conclusion means verification. Review of your outcome, your product, against your input, and say that, oh, yes, it fit our intended use. Okay, that is the conclusion. And in note 2, it lists out a number of ways to validate your method. Remember, this ISO IEC 7025 is not specific for chemical tests. So, for a number of techniques that we apply, doesn't stay here. It applies also to other disciplines. For example, calibration using reference standard or reference material is always true for chemical tests or physical tests. And then systematic assessment of the factors influencing the result. That means step by step, changing your parameter and then see the effect on the final result. Robustness, somehow, these two are related. Also systematic assessment on the critical parameter. We call it method robustness, okay? Comparison of result with other validated method. Because one of your method is accredited and validated, so you compare a new method with the old one to see whether it gets similar result. In the laboratory comparison, we compare our result with another accredited laboratory. So the last one, assessment of the uncertainty of the result based on scientific understanding of the method and practical experience. That means you don't need to carry out method validation or verification, just based on the principle. So, is any example given to you during the ISO IEC 7025 course? Or this last two? For physical tests, yes, it's always true. A simple test, use a caliper to measure the length of your phone. The principle is well known. Okay? So the only method validation is to calibrate your equipment or to repeat the measurement for a number of times for different operator. That is good enough already. Not like chemical analysis. We need to validate for long period of time before you get comparable result. For chemical tests, I encountered a case that doesn't require strict method validation and doesn't have any inter-laboratory comparison result. We accredit that laboratory for that test. You can say that that is not a chemical test. You may say that that is a physical chemistry test, okay? Measurement of viscosity. Measurement of viscosity. So they have certified reference material with low viscosity, and they calibrate the viscometer, and they just put into the sample solution, and then get the result. Okay, at that time, I think more than I think maybe over more or less near to 20 years ago. So the requirement is not so stringent at that time. So at that time, we agreed to grant them this test without interlaboratory comparison. No PT, no interlab result, but just based on the principle and their traceability to CRM. Okay? So, for 7.2.2.3, the method performance of the method should fit your intended use, should be related to the customer need. Okay, that means not all the methods have the same performance characteristic. Different methods will have different characteristics. We will come to this part when we talk about method performance characteristics. And then the next course is what to be record. Your procedure, specification of the requirement, that is the design input, okay? The performance characteristic, the result, and the conclusion. Remember, this is always and also a common thought or findings for most of the accredited laboratory in Hong Kong. The requirement is based on their findings, but not percent. Get my meaning? So when I work out all the experiment, getting all the result, then I say that the method is fit because our requirement is such that based on the result. But it should be opposite. We set out the requirement first based on our intended use, and then work out our experiments and get the data, and then review the data to see whether it fit our requirement. Okay? So remember the sequence, not based on the result to set our requirement. So in this aspect, most of the laboratory are not so well handled. Okay? So definition, validation, verification. You can see that the first sentence is exactly the same. Confirmation by examination and provision of objective evidence. Our objective evidence will be our experimental data. That is our experimental result. And for validation, although there are different definitions, more or less the same meaning, we stick to this one because this is the definition given in ISO IEC 7025, where the specific requirements are adequate for an intended use. Who set this adequate requirement? Maybe we come to this first. Verification, given item fulfills specific requirement. For verification, we say that it fulfills specific requirement. That means the requirement have been stated already. The requirement have been stated. We just work out whether we fulfill the stated requirement. That is verification. That where to put the requirement. Where are all these requirements be documented? Standard. For standard, they have document not all the standard will have fully documentation of their requirement. At least they will say what matrix to be applied, okay? And some of the standard, they will specify your working condition, temperature, your column to be used, the filter paper to be used. And some will say your working range. You should calibrate your equipment from which form to which form. So you should demonstrate to the assessor, to Hawkers, whether you fulfill this requirement. And for environmental tests, the requirements such as accuracy, that means the bias, and also the precision is also given in the standard. So you need to demonstrate this to the accreditation body. So this means verification is for standard method. Then what is validation? Validation, you don't have the requirement. You don't have the requirement. And this specific requirement is based on your intended use. So you get a request from your customer. Then it is the responsibility of the laboratory to analyze for the exact need of your customer. So what about if I give you a bottle of drink? Is that safe for drink? What is the need? Is that safe for drink? What should you do? Assuming this is a bottle of water, what should you do? In the old days, when there are outbreak, I always receive call from the public at Hawkers. What should I do? First of all, this is their request. Then the intended use is to check for the safety. The safety. But how to define the safety? As a professional, sooner or later, I should say, you should know where to find your information. For water safety, is there any regulation in Hong Kong? The first step, okay? If there is no regulation in Hong Kong, what about international practice? Then go to WHO, World Health Organization. They have a whole list of metals and the level prohibited in water. That means the level of metal should be less than the specific level as specified in the table. A whole list of organic with levels. Then you can suggest to your client, or we need to check for microorganism. Is there any microbial in the water? Okay. Any heavy metals, any organic? 3 types of tests. And then you need to check whether you have the capability of doing that. So if you want to develop a method for this, then the intended use may be organic. Water organic in water. This is the intended use. And then you need to check the level of this organic. Of course, there are many organics. The organics normally are in ppb level. So can I use a method, just TCFID, to check for the organic? I need to find an equipment that can be sensitive enough to check the organic compounds at such a low level, ppb level, okay? So you set the requirement. the requirement are your own preset requirement based on your intended use, okay? So this intended use is specified by your customer, but the requirement is set by you, preset by you. So you develop a method to see whether it can fulfill this requirement, the preset requirement. That should be fulfill the need of the intended use of your customer, okay? So the procedure, the meaning is totally different from this verification. Verification, the requirements are already stated in the standard method. And for this method validation, normally they are in-house method. You need to find out a method, okay, to fit for the intended use of your customer. So objective evidence, just your data, okay? Fitness for purpose is the degree to which data produced by measurement process enable a user to make technically and administratively correct decision for a stated purpose. So the stated purpose, just like my example, is, oh, my bottle of water is safe for drink. That is the fitness for purpose. You need 3 experiment to test on whether the water is safe, okay? So this is fitness for purpose. So validation is just the whole process, ensuring your developed method to establish the performance characteristic and the limitation. So, or I will not ask to reproduce, even for definition, to reproduce exactly the same in your examination or in your quiz. Just you can point out the major idea, then it's okay. So one of the typical questions I will set in the examination is to compare the pair of terms. The pairs of terms. Just like rational method and empirical method. What are the difference? Give me examples. Okay? And what is the difference of validation and verification? That's another example. Okay. So, do I give you the Excel file? Or just the PowerPoint, the PDF? Just the PDF, no Excel, okay? For the Excel, I will give you later, because on and off there are quite a number of calculations to be done. Although I put it also in the PDF, but for the calculation part, I will give you also the Excel, so you can see clearly the equation for the calculation. And in that Excel, yeah, I include the validation part and also the workshop, going through the whole method validation, maybe 1 workshop or 2 workshops. And then the first page is pairs of terms. Pairs of terms. So that will make you some idea what pairs to be compared in the examination. Oh, let's have a break for 15 minutes. We will back at 20:30. Substandard goods, safety, and loss of the customer. Nowadays, environmental testing. Okay, there is hazardous material or compounds in the environment, in air, in water, and meditation. So if the ingredient amount is incorrect, then the effect of the medicine will be affected, okay? What is the source of this so-called incompetence or invalid result? Somehow, calculation. wrong unit. Unsuitable method. You use a unsuitable method or wrong method to determine your analyte. For example, if we just want to find out the free form, but you use a total digestion method, then the result will be totally different. Okay? So wrong method, contamination, interference. The sample should be absence of your analyte, but just that there is interference coming out together, and you wrongly identify that as your analyte. That is interference. Calibration error. Don't think that this is not a serious problem. Quite a number of laboratories encounter this problem during my assessment to their laboratory. Sampling error. You can't get a homogeneous sample. Loss degradation. Don't think that laboratory will conduct the analysis once they receive the sample. They will group together in a batch and then work out the analysis. And during the storage of your sample in your laboratory, will your analyte degrade or lost? How to store your sample? This will be a problem, causing to incompetence error, okay? So, in ensuring valid result, this is the most famous. How many M? 4M1E. Man, 人 machine 人机无法玩，可以吗？最后一个就是 quality management system，OK，、最重要的是这5个元素。Here we see that man, within ISO IEC 7025, we have a topic on personnel, 6.2. Machine is 6.4 and 6.5. Material is also covered in 6.4, okay? Method, the whole 7.2 is method. Environmental is 6.3, okay? So these factors combining together will give you valid result. Now we just concentrate on this method. And during method development, basically you also include material, machine, and environment when you develop a method, okay? So we will go through all this. So, method type. For fully validated standard method, we just need to work out verification. But if this is a standard method, you use new equipment, modify the setting, then this is validation. You need to fully validate the modified portion to see whether you still can get valid result. Laboratory derived or non-standard method, this is primary validation. That is full validation, okay? We always say to derive the method, validation. So how many data should we obtain before we say that our method is good enough? How to fit the intended use? What should be done? Will there be any international guideline? You can't just think out by yourself, oh, we just cover this, then method is good enough. No, you need to prove to the assessor that your results are good enough, are valid. So let's see. According to the fitness for purpose of analytical method, that is a document from Eurochem. I will also give you this reference. This is the basic guideline for my material for the general part for the general part, not for the specific part. The four basically are just the same as this diagram, but just in wordings. So newly developed method, then validation. The criteria is to set the requirement for the intended use in the laboratory. The outcome is objective evidence, okay? So if this is a valid method with specification, then you just need to verify, okay? The specification for performance characteristic will apply for routine use. The objective evidence is how you apply the method in your laboratory, also by interlab or other experimental data, okay? So if there is need of modification, it will be a combination of tools, validation and verification. Verify the stated performance and to validate the modified part, okay? So this is a combination, okay? So don't need to look at all tedious wordings, but just remember, if standard method, this is verification. In-house method or method with modification, then you need to go to validation, okay? So the whole flow of validation, first of all, identify the need of your customer. Just like safety of this drink, this is the need. Then you go to literature to see whether there are any published method for the need, for the requirement. So we identify the need is safety. Then the requirement is 3 different types of tests: metals, microbial, and also organic. For each test, the level to be determined is specified in WHO, okay? So this is the requirement. Then you need to find out whether there are any published method for these 3 types of tests. And then you sort for qualified personnel. If there is any need of sophisticated equipment such as MSMS, are they competent enough to operate this LC-MSMS, or are they competent to interpret the result? So competent personnel, adequate resources. We don't have LC-MSMS. How can we perform the test? Then you need to think of alternative mode, whether you can find out a simplified method to screen out whether there is any presence of the possible analytes, okay? Then develop the method, collection of evidence. So review against whether it meets your requirement. Or one of the method, the reporting limit or the sensitivity is not good enough, then you need to kick off again. Once again, find another method, do again, and then look again. If this method is good enough, then set your internal QC to set the quality control to make sure the batch-to-batch results are still valid. Document and then go for authorization. Then the manual can be put in use. So this is the simplified flow of method validation, step by step, okay? This is also from the reference. The steps basically are just the same. So, customer problem, identify method, and then evaluate the method performance. If the method fit for the purpose, then issue validation report. No, can we relax some analytical requirement? If yes, then okay. If no, then loop again. Find another method, loop again, okay? So both are just the same, okay? So the first question comes, we know the customer need, then identify the requirement. To select a method, how to select a method. I give you an example here. You need to think of all this before you select a method, okay? Do your customers' request need to satisfy and agree requirement, such as regulatory requirement? If the toys is shipped to Europe, then they are forced to comply with the EN 71 for toys. Yeah, that is their regulatory requirement. Is there any customer requirement? For example, this is a toy manufacturer. Normally, their requirement is more stringent or tightened than the international guideline to ensure their product will not be sent back, okay, from the enforcement body. Okay. So, what are the expected concentration level? If this is regulatory, then you have the legislation limit, then you have the, but will the samples be positive or negative? What is the sample type? How many jobs will you get in future? You need to think all of that. If all the samples are negative samples, that means they don't contain the analyte you are targeting. Then why bother the quantitative test? The test is negative. Why is that you need to bother for the quantitative test? Yes, you need to develop the quantitative test in case there is positive sample. But you also need to develop a qualitative test to screen out 99% of your negative tests. For most of the qualitative tests, they are easy, no tedious procedure, okay? Easy labor, the cost of the test is much more cheaper, okay? So, qualitative, semi-quantitative, which test is more sensitive? Which test is selective? Will there be any interference in your sample type? Are the tests you select, are the method you select selective enough to identify your analyte? So all this should be bear in mind first. What about the sampling? What about hairy crab? Just like the example I give you. How to get the sample? What is a sample for the hairy crab? Just the meat or including the crab? Normally, we just consume the meat. So for food testing, we always say that the edible part, okay? So we will remove all the shell before testing, okay? But hairy crab is quite difficult to get the meat from the crab. So this is the sampling part, okay? And there are meat part and also the creamy yellow part. So, which part will contain your antibiotics more? It depends on the solubility. Normally, they are relatively fat soluble. They should be contained in higher concentration in the oily part, okay? We call the yolk part, okay? So, how to mix the meat and the yolk part evenly? That is your sampling procedure. You should ensure your test portion is sufficiently homogeneous before getting valid result. So this is the sampling part. So which method is the most suitable? Then how to do the validation. The time, the cost, the type of equipment need to buy, frequency of false negative and false positive result, the limit of detection, quantification, working range, any specific equipment, accommodation and environmental condition. Will there be certified CRM? That means any certified reference material for your method, okay? So, for this specific environmental condition, wait a minute. If you want to determine the amount of vitamin in either health food, tablet, or food, you need a red room, you need a dark room, because they will degrade. Yeah. So this, you should think of all that, making your laboratory ready before the method validation. Okay. So here, also clinical. Legislation requirement ban in Hong Kong zero tolerance. The meaning of zero is 0.3. This is set out by the government tender. They said that your method should be capable of detecting any presence of chlorofinical at like 0.3 ppb or above, okay? Expected customer, outsourcing work from government. So, only customer. Normally, you will not have any other customer or client. Expected annual number of samples, around 1,000. That means 80 to 90 samples per month. And then the expected result, mostly negative, except hairy crab. And for hairy crab, this is a specific tender, seasonal tender, okay, not general tender. Any specific method? No. Available screening technique? Many. ELISA, that is the enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay I talked about. Strip test, radioimmunoassay, that is another type of screening test. They are not confirmative. Quantitative technique, GCMS, LCMS, MS. Any CRM available? Yes. Any proficiency testing program? Yes, from Paphos, UK. That is specific for food testing in United Kingdom, okay? Scenario 1, if you have LCMSD or LCMS-MS equipped already, then of course, you just need to develop one method, qualitative, quantitative, and confirmative using this equipment. You don't need to buy anything, okay? But the setting, the method performance characteristic for quantitative, confirmative, and qualitative will be different. And then, highly recommend an additional screening test using strip tests. Then, fast. For quantitative test, just using this example, you need to take out the sample, the meat, homogenize, and then using buffer and salt to sort your protein out before going through the SPE, that is solid phase extraction cartridge. So this takes long time before you can clean up before going to the LCMS or GCMS, okay? But for this strip test, you just need to add a buffer together with your kit. Dissolve your meat in the buffer and then centrifuge. Use the supernatant, drop onto the strip and see whether there is a positive bank. Of course, you need to do quality control test, okay? So, you can see the difference between screening test and the quantitative test. Think of just submit and then adding the buffer, centrifuge, go into the stream. You can finish the test per sample within half an hour. Within half an hour. But for quantitative test, just the SPE cleanup procedure, you need over half an hour already. So the question is, don't always, we aim at high-end instrument. But as commercial lab, making money is the most important, especially if you are at the manager level. You should complete your test within the shortest period of time, using minimal manpower, the cheapest. As this 90% are negative sample, why don't you bother for the quantitative test? Then we just go for the screening test. Screen out all the negative sample and do the remaining 10% positive sample. Okay? So here, if you have the equipment already, so develop two types of method. Okay? For scenario 2, we don't have any method. Development is too expensive. For GCMS, the cheapest is around 1 million. For LCMS-MS, I think the cheapest one is 2 or 3 millions. Okay? We always say that we have many facts in government laboratory. Because within the room, there are many GCMS, LCMS, MS already, different types of MS. So if you have a chance of making a visit to government lab, yes, it is a good idea. If you don't have, and you should understand, within that 1,000 samples, how many return or revenue can you get back? Is that sufficient for buying an equipment? The highest cost, I think, because this is a tender, many laboratories bid for the tender, and the lowest price will be selected. So the money for 1 year cannot be sufficient for GCMS. So if you don't have that, you bid, and you want to expand to that, then just develop the screening test and bid for the non-specific tender. Almost 99% is negative. For the positive one, just outsource to another accredited laboratory to perform the test. So this is the way of thinking. I give you the example is just to illustrate to you. You need to think about in details what to select before you step out one step further, okay? So, now we prepare for method validation. The first topic is blank. What is blank? According to Eurochem, blank means nothing, okay? Without the sample, and we call blank. But here, they classify blank into a total of 5 types. The first one is calibration blank. What is calibration blank? That means only containing the solvent used to prepare your standard solution, just without your standard, okay? That is calibration blank, okay? The second one is procedure blank or method blank. Method bank is contain all everything within your method, reagent, everything, except no sample, okay? And go through the whole procedure. This is procedure bank. That means if your procedure needs to go through solvent extraction, then you add solvent into it, and then go through SPE cleanup, then you also go through SPE cleanup, and then filter, and then reduce the volume by by nitrogen, then nitrogen, and reconstitute by another solvent, then everything just follow exactly what the procedure say, but just without the sample. And this is the procedure bank, okay? So procedure bank, calibration bank, what will be the next? Reagent bank. So what is reagent bank? Sounds so funny. Reagent bank is the mixture of any solvent and or reagent that would be present to the detector for analysis of the test sample and is analyzed to determine if it contributes to the measurement signal. This is not the calibration bank. Reagent bank normally, just like the I will give you some example to explain the difference. If in the final step, your analyte will undergo derivatization, that means react with another reagent, then this reagent bank will contain the final solvent and also the derivatization. This will go to the detector, okay? So this is the reagent bank. And lastly, the solvent bank. Maybe everybody will think that the solvent bank should be the same as calibration bank. Is that right? Is that right? No. That is not always true. Mostly true, but not always true. Solvent bank is the solvent that used to redissolve your final sample solution or final solid, okay? For all these different types of blank, as I say, calibration blank, maybe one solvent. Solvent blank will be another solvent. Will this solvent cause interference to your system? That means will give signal to your detection system. You need to select a propane solvent. Okay, this is the first step. Select proper blank. Proper blank. Oh, let's see. The last one is sample blank. What is sample blank? That means a sample will not contain your analyte. That will be sample blank. For some of the tests, we don't have, it is difficult to find sample bank because all your target sample contain your analyte. Then you don't have any sample, okay? So, the use of this sample bank is to detect the selectivities. That means whether your measurement detector or your whole method can differentiate the possible interference in your sample from your target analyte, okay? And this is useful to determine the LD and LQ of your method to assess your working range, that is to perform the recovery, the spike recovery. So that is the last usage, preparation of spike sample, and to estimate trueness, precision, and everything. So the sample bank is very important. And how can we solve the problem if we don't have the sample bank? So this is a general picture of the different function of different blank. Calibration blank is just to determine the instrument working range. Procedure blank, the effect of the whole measurement procedure, including your apparatus, your reagent use, everything, whether they will contribute any possible signal to your detection system, okay? Reagent blank, also correction of your reagent. Solvent blank, this is monitoring of the carryover, okay? Sample blank, determination of LD/LQ, trueness, funkiness, selectivity. That means throughout the whole method validation, we need to use sample blank. We need to use sample blank. And here, there is a problem. I say that it is not always true that we can get sample blank. So, is the sample matrix that contains no analyte available? Yes, then this is the true sample bank. True sample bank. Okay? We can find out a particular matrix that do not have your analyte. Then this is your true sample bank. If this is not available, that means your sample matrix always contain a little bit of your analyte. So can the matrix determine for the content? Then we will have blank correction. Blank correction. That means subtract the effect of the sample blank before we calculate for the other content, okay? This one I will also give you example. So, if all the sample you encounter contain high level of your analyte, then what should we do? You don't have any blank, then what should we do? Simulated blank. Simulated blank. We create a mixture with similar composition as your sample. Then this is a mimic blank or simulated blank, okay? If all the three are not possible, then you better go for another method, okay? So just look at the picture. You may be quite difficult to think of, oh, why is that we don't have blank? It all depends on the types of tests you are involving. For most of the safety tests or contamination tests, we don't expect our sample to contain the analyte. Understand? Safety tests. For example, for the Chinese medicine, we control the level of pesticides and the level of metals in the Chinese medicine. So we don't expect this Chinese medicine contain high level of the pesticides or heavy metals. Okay? So most of them are sample blank. Most of them are sample blank. Of course, in order to determine whether they are true sample blank, you need to conduct confirmation tests, okay? But if I target at nutrition labeling, do you know what is nutrition labeling? Yes, the label on different types of food, okay? So normally, the analyte you are targeting at, such as fat content, protein content, sugar content, quite a number of food will contain all this. So you may not be able to get a sample bank, okay? So we can mimic a sample bank. I will give you an example on that. So here, so example 1. This differentiate when 1 ml of hydrochloric acid, hydrofluoric acid, and 10 ml of concentration nitric acid used for digestion of metals in ceramic, glass, and crystal, and other material. Final volume is 100 ml of distilled water. The calibration blend, we use 3% of nitric acid. That means we buy a standard solution and then dilute the standard solution with 3% of nitric acid to the concentration that we want, okay? So the calibration blend will be 3% nitric acid. What about the solvent blend? Is solvent blend also 3%? No. The solvent blend is not 3%, but 10%. Because 10 ml concentration nitric acid in 100 ml, that is 10%. That is the solvent, final solvent, going to the detector for your sample, okay? And the reagent bank is also different because the reagent bank contains the 1 ml hydrofluoric acid, okay? So 1% hydrofluoric acid and 10% nitric acid in distilled water, okay? Reagent bank, all the reagent going to the detector. So this also include the HF. But the solvent blank, just the final solvent. Calibration blank is the solvent. Here when I say solvent, doesn't mean this is organic solvent, but just the medium to dissolve your standard solution, okay? So, procedure bank. Here, procedure bank is the same as the reagent bank, but go through the whole process, okay? Although it classifies into 4 different types of blank, but the most important are just the procedure bank and the calibration bank. Procedure bank basically contain the solvent bank and the reagent bank already. We don't separate the two. We don't separate. Any reagent used will be included in the procedure bank already. And the final solvent bank is also included in your procedure bank, okay? But just using different terms, so we don't need to bother. The most important is just the procedure bank. But the procedure bank can be different from the calibration bank, okay? Here, there is a difference already. So, for the example 2, the calibration bank is methylene chloride, but the solvent blend will be hexane. Why? Why is that we don't use the same solvent? Normally, for calibration blend, we prepare in a stock solution at higher concentration in order to maintain its stability, its concentration. We don't use I think it's too volatile. During keeping of your standard solution for weeks, for months, it will evaporate and the concentration will change, okay? So normally, we don't use hexane as the calibration brand, but use some other solvent. And it also depends on the concentration and solubility. If you prepare high concentration solution, you need to use a solvent that will dissolve your solid much better, okay? But the final solvent, this is going to GC, and you use a solvent that fit GC more easily, okay? So normally we use hexane. They are volatile. The injection temperature need not be too high or although it also depends on the boiling point of your analyte. So here, there is a difference. Although the solubility may be the same, if we don't use hexane, we will prefer to use octane for the stock solution. So once again, the calibration band and the solvent band will be different. Okay? The third example is a little bit different. It's quite interesting, this example. So, if anybody is interested in this summer research project, we can carry out this test, formaldehyde in air. So this formaldehyde, how to determine the amount of formaldehyde? We can use HPLC, but formaldehyde itself do not have any UV absorption and no color. And formaldehyde, when you inject to GC, there is no peak. This is the only organic compound without any signal at FID, okay? So, we use a derealization agent, 2,4-DNP. That is 2,4-dinitrophenyl hydroxine. When 2,4-DNP will couple with formaldehyde, forming a color complex, then you can analyze the concentration by visible region, UV visible region, the absorbance at the visible region, then you will quantify the result of formaldehyde. So, if your calibration, the calibration curve can be constructed using A with B as the derealization agent. The solvent is acetonitrile. In this case, both calibration and solvent band will be 2,4-DNP and acetonitrile. Okay? That means this is your standard solution. Inside you have formaldehyde and 2,4-DNP. And the solvent is ACN, acetonitrile, okay? For your sample, this sample after extraction, you also dissolve in ACN and then you add 2,4-DNP. So the calibration band and the solvent band are the same. Get the meaning? Just the same practice. We add the derealization agent in the reaction bottle and then heat up, and they will form color, okay? So, both the calibration band and the solvent band are the same in this case. But you can say luckily, we can buy commercial addict. That is the finished product, the coupled product in AB form. That means we can buy standard. That is the reaction product of formaldehyde with 2,4-DNP already. In this case, the calibration blank, you don't need to add the 2,4-DNP anymore because they have combined together already. So the calibration blank is only ACN. But for the solvent blank, we extract only the formaldehyde. You still need to add the 2,4-DNP. So the solvent blank will be formaldehyde plus 2,4-DNP. Get the difference? This is an interesting case. Normally, for the calibration standard, we use the same material as the analyte. That is formaldehyde. But in this case, instead of using the analyte, we use the reacted product, that is a derivatized product as the calibration standard. So making this difference, okay? But just to differentiate what is calibration bank and what is solvent bank, but the most important is the calibration bank and the procedure bank. And within a batch of analysis, we include the calibration bank and procedure bank. Sometimes we also include the solvent bank to monitor whether there is any carryover, okay? So 3 blank will be used, but not reagent bank. Reagent bank basically included in the procedure blank already. So these are the 4 types of blank. And for sample blank, blank correction. Sample blank, if 1 gram of your sample contain 3 microgram of the analyte, okay? This is by the method quantification. So if 7 microgram is added to your sample, to the 1 gram, and the final determined result is 9.3, then the actual result is 9.3 minus the 3 gram, that is 6.3. The recovery will be 6.3 over 7, that is 0.9, that means 90%. 7 microgram is added to your sample, but we just get back 6.3. So the recovery will be 90%, okay? This is a typical blank correction because your blank sample contains a minor level of your analyte. So you determine the content of your analyte in your sample first, and then when you further add another level of analyte into your sample in order to study the recovery, then this is the blank correction, okay? And then the next one is simulated blank. For tap water, nickel is a parameter to be tested in tap water, but quite a number of tap water contain nickel. The level is around 5 ppb, 5 microgram per liter, okay? But the reporting limit of nickel, we prefer to be set to 1 ppb. 5 is already much higher than 1. So how can we use 5 ppb tap water to study a 1 ppb recovery? That is impossible. Then we can use a mimic blank. What is a mimic blank? We know that tap water, the major component is chloride, calcium carbonate, and sulfate. So we use distilled water. Distilled water do not contain any nickel, okay? Then we add some chloride and calcium carbonate and sulfate to this distilled water. And this matrix is similar to the matrix of tap water. This type is known as mimic blank or simulated blank. We simulated a component that is your target sample, so that to study whether your method is good enough to differentiate this carbonate, calcium, sulfate, and chloride by your system, whether they will produce interference just like your tap water, okay? So this is a simulated bank. Then using this simulated bank, you can go further for spike recovery test, okay? So the brand either correct. If the level is low, then you can use brand correction. If the brand is always higher than your reporting limit, then using simulated brand. Okay. So, any questions up to here first? So basically, we just cover a little bit on classification, different types of classification, and how to select a method. Think about all sorts of possible outcome first before you select a method. And then now we go for the preparation for method validation. The first step is to select a pole-based solvent. So in selection of a pole-based solvent, there are many choices. We classify there are 4 brands and then the sample brand. If there is no sample brand, either brand correction or simulated brand. Okay? So if there is no questions,